Please welcome to the stage The Ringer founder and CEO Bill Simmons with Bloomberg's Lucas Shaw.
This is like a love seat. I don't know what's going on here.
It is a love seat. We didn't have pillows yesterday though, so we.
I like the pillows. Good ad.
Good. Thank you for doing this. I've given everyone else, for the most part, a softball to start with. I feel like you don't need that.
Yeah, can we talk about the weather?
So I'm just gonna jump right into your favorite subject.
I was going to give you a softball. I was surprised that you showed up today for work after the Dodgers collapsed in 3 games.
Well, you know,
I thought it would be like a guest host or something.
the good thing is I had this event last night as a distraction. So I
Oh,
did
good.
I did not follow a moment. I came off stage. I forget if it was after Ari or after Donna. And I just saw a text message on one of my group chats about how the Dodgers gave up like 4 home runs in an inning, and I was thrilled that I did not see that.
It's a dark place to be.
Okay, well, so you started there. I'll go back at you.
Yeah.
When are you going to accept that the Lakers already have as many titles as the Celtics?
You count the Minnesota titles, though. It's unbelievable.
Of course you do.
There was like 5 of them. You didn't even have George Mikan's number retired. I never understood how that worked.
You know.
Listen, if you guys need to count titles won in other cities to make yourself feel better, that's fine. I'm okay. We won all of our titles in Boston, Massachusetts.
Yeah, and you've won how many since?
17.
No,
18,
but how many since 1990?
Oh, that's a low number. Yeah, that's I think it's 1 since 1986.
I think, yeah.
But man,
But you went to 96 because you didn't want to go all the way back to 90 because it's 1 since 90.
If you look from 56 to 86, domination.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all jokes aside, for a while now in your business and podcasting, the conversation has sort of turned negative, right? There's a long time, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of.
Turned it negative. There's people.
Did
like
I
you as
turn
a
it negative,
journalist
or did
talking
it
about
happen?
Negative. No, it's it's fine.
Okay.
You have culpability a little bit.
Where did the industry go wrong, and why are you still very bullish on it?
I don't think the industry went wrong. I just feel like things move in phases and you have little eras, right? So, I started doing my podcast in 2007, all the way through when Serial hit. That was like phase 0, right? That's when people are like, wait, podcast, what is that? How do I listen to it? And then, it was great for me because I had one of the only big ones. Serial happened, and then people are like, podcast, what's going on? And then you saw a lot of the heavily produced one. You saw bigger celebrities get in. And that went probably until, I would say, 2018. And then Spotify got involved and some other players, and the numbers went through the roof. Some things worked, some mistakes were made. And I think by 2023, I think people really have a sense of like, what is this? What works? What doesn't work? And what the challenges are. And I think, I'm pretty bullish on it because I just think we're moving into a new era of wherever it's going. And the old era is definitely done. I mean, the deals are changing. I think the standards for what works for a podcast, I think people have a better idea. It's like you can't just be famous and have a podcast. That can't be the 6th thing you're doing. It can't be something that you didn't spend any time on because, it's not like YouTube or these other things that you could listen to. Yeah, I can watch 10 YouTube videos in a half hour as I'm watching television, right? Podcasts, you're trapped with the podcast. So people are making choices, and the quality of those choices and the things you're picking has to hit a certain standard. I think everybody's starting to realize that, and the stuff that is elevating above is the stuff that's good. It's either the first or the second most important thing the person's doing. The Smartless podcast took off because it was during the pandemic and those guys couldn't work, and they threw themselves into it and created a good podcast. The Strikeforce podcast that we just did, those 5 guys, they were going nuts because they didn't have their late night shows, and they were doing these Zooms during the week, and they decided, hey, this should be a podcast. So then all of a sudden it's a podcast, and they put real time into it. And I think I always laugh when, especially the last 8, 9 years when people got into this, and I'm like, people think we have to compete against this person. This is like the number 6 thing they're doing. So I think people realize now that the stakes have changed a little.
How was your brief brush with the Daily Mail after your Royals comments?
Oh, man. Yeah, it turns out people know those two. Yeah, who knew? Look, I stand by everything I said.
When you're talking about the change that's happening or sort of recognition, is it just about focusing? I mean, focusing on quality seems sort of obvious, or having people have it be their main job.
It wasn't obvious 2 years ago. Like, think of the deals that you were reporting on with people who, either with production companies that had never done podcasts or with talent that had never done podcasts, and people just assuming it was going to translate. I think it's obvious, but I think there was like a 4-year stretch there when it was really weird to me, because I knew what it took to make a really good podcast, and we'd been in that business dating back from Grantland, trying to elevate other people's podcasts, and then at The Ringer, and then we got to Spotify. And there's a lot of time and TLC that goes into it. And it's not one of those things where it's like, all right, you now have a podcast, turn it on and it will succeed. Like, celebrity doesn't matter with podcasts. What matters is, what's your point of view? Are you consistent? Do you have a piece of turf that you're trying to grab? Even when we talked about Matt's podcast, which was, almost 2 years ago, we put real thought into like, what should this be? Who are we going after? And the more we talked about it, it's like, we want an audience to be on the move. The podcast has to be probably 30 minutes or less. It's one topic. It feels like Matt's newsletter. And we want to like elevate the discussion around something and the nuances in it, and be this repeatable thing that's part of somebody's life. I don't think most people put thought into the podcast like that, but now you're starting to see it, I think, a little bit more.
One thing that I don't think people realize with podcasting is, and to your point earlier, most shows have a really small audience.
Oh yeah.
For your barometer, like, what is the audience size that you consider a hit show?
You're gonna hate this answer, but I try not to look at the audiences. To me, I feel like, does the pod stand out? I have an awesome inner circle, and they'll tell me if something's doing bad. But for the most part, like, I honestly, genuinely don't know what Matt's audience is, for example. I don't know what like Derek Thompson's audience is. But I know that those guys have a piece of turf that matters for what they're trying to do. And if there's some big topic or some important topic, I'm gonna care what they think. So I think you have to look at it that way. You have to look at like, how does this stand out? Because you're competing, there's 3 million podcasts plus 17 million white noise podcasts. So there's 20 million podcasts out there that you're competing against, but how do you stand out? How are you different? And if you're competing against a bunch of people in the same space, why are people going to listen to you instead of those other people? That's how we think about it.
If you're not, you may not know how many people are listening to Matt or Derek. I assume you know how many people are listening to your show.
I actually don't know the exact number, but I know it's the biggest it's been, which I think is hilarious because I'm completely washed up. I don't know how I pulled that off. This is really like a gravy train time for me. I think it reminds me a lot of what the internet was like in the late 2000s, because I'm gonna say around like 2007, the blogs really started to go nuts, right? There was just a million people, everyone had a blog, everybody was writing, everybody was online. And there was 2 years there where I think the common feeling was blogs are gonna win, shorter, faster, immediate. And I just didn't feel like that was the case. I still had the biggest column at ESPN.com. And I was like, my column's growing. Like, I know that's not true. And there were other people I read, and I knew, like, I'm still reading that person, and they're not writing that way. And I think what eventually happened is there's so much noise, and there's so many bylines, and so many takes, and so many writers that people kind of gravitate toward the trusted people, the bigger people, the people they know, the best stuff. So in a weird way, the more podcasts that there are, the better it is for the bigger podcasts, because there's too many choices. They're like, oh, well, I know that one.
How much harder does that make it for a new one to break through?
I think it's pretty easy. Like, look at the Kelseys. Did you know the Kelseys had a podcast 2 months ago?
I don't think so.
I don't think I did either. And now it's one of the biggest podcasts. I still feel like if it's a personality or if it's an angle or a topic, I think that's going to win. I think the thing that's changed the most, I think, over the last 5 years, and especially now we're more involved in the monetization side, it's just really hard to, the 10 episode, 12 episode, the stuff that...
The serials.
Based on the serial model of, oh, this is how to do it, it's really hard to sell unless you can have an awesome season 1 and then it leads to season 2. because one of the reasons that The Ringer has had so much success from an advertising standpoint, even back when we were on our own, is because we can sell 6, 9, 12 months ahead. Like we know like basketball starting in 2 weeks. Like guess what? I'm gonna be talking about basketball on my pod. So you have somebody like State Farm, they're figuring out how to spend their money in January, February, March. It's like, well, Bill he's going to do basketball in October.
And they have a lot of basketball relationships.
So we're making those deals 6, 7 months ahead of time. If you have something that you spent 2 years on, it can be awesome, and you go in and you pitch that to a CMO or you pitch that to a brand, you're still having to explain what it is. It's like Lucas has this new podcast. It's a narrative pod about how the Dodgers just choke every year unless there's a pandemic season. And he's going to talk to all these people, and they're still going to be like, well, what does it sound like? I want to hear it. And unless they hear it and they know what it is, it's just hard to get money. So that's why Serial Season 2, Season 3, slow burn, some of the old school ones, they can keep doing those now because people know what it is.
It's known, yeah.
Yeah, but those are I really respect those.
They're also
pods.
expensive to make.
They're really expensive. The people that do them, the producers are like incredibly talented, and they're really hard. They take like a year. So if you're deciding if you're going to invest that kind of time, can we make the money back?
Yeah.
And I know Spotify, we look at stuff now, and we're not the only company like that with the MGs, and they want to make more money than they spend. Like it's not rocket science. It's 2023, but that's where we've landed. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. How much money does The Ringer make now?
A healthy amount. Yeah, healthy.
More?
You guys love trying to get figures and
Yeah,
downloads.
that's what we do.
I know. We're doing.
You're profitable.
Oh yeah, yeah. We've been profitable since 2016, but I think there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with Spotify. A lot of the stuff that Lee Brown spearheaded, the head of sales, that I just think from an ad tech standpoint, that's the part that if you're betting on Spotify long term, like the ad tech stuff that we're building is going to be a huge differentiator. I'm not just saying that like Kool-Aid drinker. Like Spotify is not perfect. I'll be the first one to admit it. But what they're trying to figure out with the ad sales side is something that, if you think podcasts started 07, 08 range, we're now year 15, and we still didn't have any of the technology or sales expertise for this stuff. And it was very similar to the internet, actually, where a lot of people in the early wave of sales for pods were people that kind of came from other places. Like when the internet started, you'd have people running like Newspaper X, their website, or some really good content website, and it was somebody who probably failed somewhere else. And now it's like these people that are building their way up and have worked, and they understand it, and they've been in the industry for years, and they have connections. So I think from that end, it's that everything's elevating.
Yeah. You mentioned Derek and Matt's pods, which I would say for your business are sort of different from what you're known for, right? You're sort of sports, pop culture, but you've been adding little things on. How are you thinking about expanding the Ringer universe and how it all ties together?
Yeah, it's passion points. So I think for us, sports and culture, that was always the DNA dating back to Grantland. And then how can you add little things that seem in the general vein? We've always tried to be like the person you're sitting next to at the bar who's fun to talk to and knows shit. And you're like, oh man, that was really fun to sit next to that person on the train, and they knew this and this and this. I think growing forward for us, there's a bunch of things that pop up. Like there's player podcast stuff. That's been a little bit of movement now, trying to decide what's real and what's not real. I actually think the social media elements of those pods are better than the actual pods.
Yeah, I watch a lot of clips on Instagram. I don't actually listen to any of those
and I think
people.
that's most people, where they listen to they watch a 70-second clip of them. It's for us, it's more like you keep learning what not to do, and that stuff's pretty obvious. Like this league wants to do a podcast deal and produce pods, and it's like, well, that's probably. What's that mean? So does that mean we can't talk about the league in the same way? Do we have to have the commissioner on? And so it's more, we try to keep a little bit of a distance, so we have a little bit of a reporting personality version of it versus feeling like we're embedded with somebody. But we're always looking for talent. I think we found more talent dating back to Grantland than anybody. and we've had the ability to keep elevating people, and that's what still is the most exciting piece to me, is trying to find something that either it's coming to the cusp or maybe there's something here, and figuring out like how to bring it to the next level.
I'm curious, you talked about a lot of the style of your shows or the person you're sitting next to interesting. Like you, for a lot of your career, have been sort of the voice of the casual, or not the casual, but like the average sports fan.
Right.
Has that gotten harder as you've gotten richer?
Oh, yeah. And older. No, there's no question. I mean, I used to, in my 20s, like I was that guy. Now I'm twice as old as I was in 1998 or whatever. I still give a shit. And, you know, it's been really instructive to me, the people when I was growing up or when I was a young adult, the people that did well. And you could kind of always tell who checked out, you know, or who didn't care about sports in the same way or didn't follow it the same way. And it started to show up in their writing or the way they talked about it. And I made a decision a long time ago, like the moment I felt like that was happening to me, I'm out. And if you listen to my pod and you listen to the stuff we do, like I still give a shit. Like I still watch football. My wife hates it. I watch football. I'm figuring out my multi-view on Sunday Ticket at 9:58, trying to figure out what 4 games I'm gonna get. And I watch football for 10 hours or 11 hours, whatever it is, and I talk to Sal about it. I still watch NBA. I watch fourth quarters in the morning. Like I obviously watch a shitload of movies and TV.
Yeah.
And
You do fewer interviews, and you switch
did
up.
fewer interviews, yeah. But that's more of a COVID thing. We had this run in 2018, 19 range when we had all these celebrities coming in. It was great because you could talk like this. Zoom sucks. It's just not the same, and you feel like you're getting them. You're like the third of the 5 interviews they're doing that day, and I just don't like it. So I've kind of phased those out a little bit.
Yeah, the two things, it feels like you do fewer interviews on the podcast, and the other thing I get from you is I don't sense that you love the management side of your job.
What do you mean? Which part?
Which part? I don't know.
They just gave me more jobs.
Well, I would say the sense I get is there's
I'm running monetization now for them. That's like
I'm not sure.
extra
I'm very
job.
curious about that.
Yeah.
But it feels like there's a little more of a buffer between you and your staff than there used to be.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And you went through a rather contentious unionization effort.
Are there non-contentious unionization efforts? Can you point me to one?
I'm not. If my colleague Josh Idelson were here, he probably could help out because he's a labor expert.
I think the biggest obstacle was COVID, and it really changed office culture in a bunch of different ways. We're not the only business trying to figure that out. Everyone I talk to who runs anything, it's a new frontier, and in some ways it's better. Like I go to the office probably once, twice a week max. I feel like I'm more productive on my own, doing stuff, like Zoom was a huge game changer, the phone calls.
But you just said you hate Zoom.
Huh?
You just said you hate
I like it with my staff. I just don't want, I don't want to interview Matt Damon on Zoom. But I think the office culture thing is something we have to all figure out, because I know for us, we have a lot of people in good positions for us now that are people that, you know, started out young and hungry and worked their way up, and I feel like they learned stuff from us, and now they have better jobs. And I haven't figured out the part of how do you have the full kind of office culture with the mentoring that you need to have if people aren't in every day. And I'm not one of those, everybody's got to be in every day, because I think the world's different, and it should be. But from a mentor standpoint, I do worry about that. Like who is the next wave of young people that move into bigger positions if they're not learning day-to-day stuff? And unless you've worked in the right kind of office, like there's so much give and take, and there's so much like, hey, hop in my office for 20 minutes, or hey, oh, we're about to talk about that at lunch, why don't you come with us? And all that stuff's now gone. So I worry about where that goes, not just for us, but for everybody.
Yeah. I want to talk for a little bit about sports documentaries, just because you were instrumental in 30 for 30, which is, you know, I think one of my favorite things that's ever been made, certainly in the sports world. It ushered in this huge boom in sports documentaries.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there are now too many of them?
Yes. And also a lot of the ideas have been done, and now we're moving into this era where to get a good idea done, you have to partner with
the athlete and you need the access and it
Beckham was the best possible version of how that goes.
was great.
Yeah, I really liked the first two parts. Last two might have been one part potentially, but I was really into it, and I didn't know a lot of his story, and I liked his interview, and I liked how they did it, and I thought it was really good. And I think so we'll still have those, but Beckham's also super famous and was also married to somebody who's super famous. And my wife really cared about their relationship as part of the doc. So you're getting everybody, even people who don't like soccer. I really worry. I could feel, I've said this before, but I could feel it happening near the end of it, 30 for 30 when I was there, when I had this idea about the Orlando Magic and the Shaq Penny era that I really wanted to do as a documentary. I laid it out. We had to convince the NBA to do it because it was kind of a small market team falling apart, and they were a little skittish on it. And they finally gave the green light. And it was this is great. This documentary is going to be awesome. And Shaq and Penny wouldn't do it unless they were EPs. And then we had to make a decision. Well, do we still want to do it if they're involved? And we made the decision yes. And it was good, but I think it would have been better if, we just did it. And I remember that moment man, this is shifting now. The Last Dance is probably the best example of how that would go, right? Because they had the best possible footage. They got great interviews with Jordan. Because he was in it, they got interviews with everybody else, and they got an incredible director. But I also think there's been a lot of bad versions of The Last Dance.
Like what?
I'm not going to say. But we have this Vince McMahon documentary that we've been working on for 3 years, I think has a chance to be really great. I really think it has a chance to be the best one I've been involved with. And I'll be interested to see what people think about that one, because it was a lot of time, and it was one where Netflix still has final cut of it, and it's a little more old school, like what the 30 for 30 model was. And I think it has a chance to be really special.
Does Vince get to see it before it comes out?
Not the giving notes on the final cut part.
He gets to see it, but he doesn't get to change anything.
I think they get to look at clips, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, because your former home, you're a sports media obsessive. If you were Bob Iger, what would you do with ESPN?
I would sell it.
To who?
I would sell it to Apple, and Apple could take their entire budget for 2 episodes of the morning show and pay for ESPN, and I think that makes a shitload of sense. They could be like, you know what, maybe we don't need to launch a rocket in outer space in episode 1. We'll just buy ESPN instead. And that'll be it.
Related question, regional sports networks. There's a lot of, it's a business that seems to be collapsing. Leagues have sort of toyed around with, should we do something ourselves? Some teams are doing local TV and streaming. How do you see that shaking out?
So I don't think I'm right on this, but my instincts keep telling me this is what's going to happen. Because if you remember the WWE, they launched their own network that had their own content and had their own pay-per-views. And it was kind of a smart, bold, ahead of its time move. And then they pivoted at the perfect time, and they sold their content to, what was it, Peacock.
Yeah.
And that was really smart too, because they were able to leverage that number as high as possible. So they always zagged where the money was and when the opportunity was. I think the opportunity for the NBA with the local teams would be to own all that themselves and own League Pass themselves and do it in a way that they could just basically own all of it. And I don't know if they'll do that or they'll have the balls to do it, but they, with the media rights deal that they're going to get from the national games, they're going to make so much money, and the players are going to be paid so much money. We're going to have guys making 75, 80 million a year. So if there was ever a time for them to kind of bet on themselves, that's the league to do it. I think what the MLS did was really interesting with what they did with Apple and giving Messi a stake. Then, of course, Messi gets hurt. But I think people are going to think outside the box more. That old model feels like don't you feel like it's kind of dying?
Yeah, I think regional sports networks have a few hundred hours of programming a year, and that's about
and then
it.
You
that's
have
relevant.
To fill all the other hours,
yeah.
And then you have to and then you're on all the time.
It's crazy.
I watch the Lakers network sometimes, and by watch, I mean hate watch. And I love when all the shows they have where they're just like, all right, today it's a 3-hour breakdown of Michael Cooper. And it's like 30 for 30, Michael Cooper. By the way, he was great. Michael Cooper killed us in Today's 7. But it's just, people just want the games. I think ESPN Plus realized that. You go to ESPN Plus, remember where they were making all those shows?
Yeah.
It's like, who are these shows for? And now it's like, you know what people go to ESPN Plus for? I go to watch Holy Cross play Fordham on Saturday at 10 in the morning. And I go to watch basically any game that exists, they have it. And that's what it is. So, why wouldn't the NBA have that?
I don't know. Okay, last question, because they'll kill me for going over. You were already talking about it back there. What's your finals prediction?
My finals prediction?
Yeah, we're going to give you an early tease before your pod.
I'm thinking about non-ironically picking the Celtics and the Lakers. And I'm going to do it, and all the Laker fans, but you're just doing that to spite us. And I'm like, I actually like being right more than I hate the Lakers. I think the Lakers are going to be really good. So it's between Lakers and Nuggets. I was going to figure it out over the weekend, but I think Boston in the East. I'm not just saying that because I'm a Celtic fan. There's been years when I was like, there's no way. This year, I think the team's really good. Unfortunately, we might have a bad coach, so we're going to learn over the next 6.
Second row Joe.
He brought Drew Holiday off the bench in the first exhibition game, and my dad and I were like, oh my God, he doesn't get it. But I would probably say Celtics, Lakers, or Celtics, Nuggets. I've narrowed it down to that.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.